Welcome in, everyone, kicking off another deep dive here. And today we're going to be looking at something pretty profound, I think.
Yeah.
We're talking about the psychological impact of suppressing the desire to cross-dress.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. And, whether this hits home for you personally or if you're just someone who wants to better understand, the complexities of self-acceptance and what that really means for people, this is going to be a really valuable exploration.
Yeah, I think it is.
So we're really going to try to unpack what happens when someone feels this very, very strong need to kind of push down and deny this part of themselves.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that this isn't as simple as, just choosing not to do something.
Right.
It's not like saying, I'm not going to have that extra slice of cake.
Exactly.
It really has some deep psychological consequences, and that's what we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is the material that we've been looking at. It suggests that when this desire to cross-dress is, kind of actively pushed down, it doesn't just vanish. It sticks around.
Yeah.
It's this persistent force.
So let's actually start there. What is that like internally when someone's really trying to bury this part of themselves? What's that immediate experience?
Well, it's a battle, right? It's this internal conflict.
Mhm.
And on the one hand, you've got this deep desire, and then on the other hand, you've got this conscious effort to kind of counteract it, and often it's quite strenuous.
Sure.
And the stuff we've been looking at, it makes it very clear this isn't a desire that just kind of fades away. It becomes this ongoing undercurrent.
It's like a constant hum
Yeah, almost like a constant
in the background.
Exactly.
So it's not so much like, flipping a switch on or off.
Right.
It's more like, I'm trying to, contain something that just naturally wants to express itself.
Yeah, it wants to come out.
And I imagine over time that constant push and pull, that tug of war internally, it starts to really wear a person down.
Oh, absolutely. And, it gives rise to a whole cascade of difficult emotions.
Like what?
Well, this ongoing battle, it breeds stress. Chronic stress is what our sources are calling it.
Wow.
Then there's frustration, right? Because the underlying desire doesn't go away.
Right.
And then often guilt creeps in, this feeling of being wrong or bad for even having this desire. And that's often, influenced by societal expectations, and then shame for not being able to just, make this feeling go away.
And it's not just that kind of, every day, oh, I'm feeling a little bit down kind of thing.
No.
What we're seeing in the material we've been looking at is that this actually can have some, pretty significant mental health implications.
Exactly. Yeah. And the stuff we've been going through, it connects this active suppression of, authentic self-expression. And that includes, gender expression to things like anxiety and depression.
Wow.
Potentially even physical health issues.
Really?
Yeah. And just think about the sheer energy
Oh, right.
it takes to constantly monitor your thoughts, your actions,
Right.
your clothing choices. I mean, some studies have even shown that using, fMRI, they've shown increased activity in areas of the brain that are related to stress when people are actively suppressing parts of their identity.
It's like having this internal sensor
Yes.
that's working overtime, just constantly red flagging every single thought, every action.
All the time. Yeah. Always on.
And that level of vigilance, that has got to be just draining.
It's exhausting. And that's, it's a big theme in what we've been reading, this profound exhaustion that comes with that constant self-monitoring.
All right.
And it's not just mentally tiring. It can lead to burnout,
Right.
where you're just completely depleted
Oh, yeah.
emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then irritability is another big one.
Oh, for sure.
If you're constantly feeling this underlying tension, it's going to come out somehow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about this feeling of shame a little bit more.
Okay.
Because I imagine that's a huge barrier for a lot of people who experience this desire to cross-dress.
It is, yeah.
Where does that sense of shame come from? Where does it originate?
Well, a lot of it comes from the messages we get from society
Okay.
about gender and how we're supposed to express ourselves,
Sure.
right? There are all these norms and cultural beliefs surrounding gender expression.
Okay.
And so many individuals, they internalize this message that, if you go against those norms, you're somehow wrong,
Oh, wow.
abnormal, or even something to be ashamed of.
So it's not coming from within. It's actually being imposed from the outside,
To a large extent, yeah.
and then it's being internalized.
Exactly. And that can lead to a really negative self-perception.
So they start to believe there's something fundamentally wrong with them.
Yeah, just for having this desire.
Yeah.
And it can be very isolating.
Right, right.
Because you feel like you're the only one
Okay.
going through this.
And then this negative self-perception that can then lead to some pretty deep-seated self-esteem issues, right? Like, tell me about that. What happens there?
Well, people might start feeling unworthy of, basic things.
Right.
Like love or acceptance or happiness.
All because of a desire.
Because of this desire that feels so, integral to who they are.
Right.
And it's just not fair.
No, it's not.
And one thing that our sources really highlight is this difficult cycle.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this pattern.
Tell me more.
So you try to suppress the desire, right? And, maybe you view it as this moral failing.
Okay.
But then the desire inevitably resurfaces.
Of course, yeah.
And then you interpret that as weakness.
Oh, wow.
Like a lack of control.
Right.
And this perceived relapse, as some people call it, it just reinforces that negative self-image.
So it's like you're setting yourself up to fail, almost.
Yeah. It's like an impossible standard.
Because the urge is going to come back?
It will. It's going to come back, and then every time it does, it just confirms those negative beliefs.
So it's self-sabotage, almost.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really destructive loop.
And that can really lead to some, I imagine, significant emotional distress.
It can. And it often manifests as anxiety and depression.
Right.
And our sources talk about this idea of an emotional bottleneck.
Oh, tell me more.
So when this fundamental need for self-expression is blocked, it creates all this internal turmoil.
Okay.
Like a dam.
Right.
All this pressure just builds up.
Yeah.
And it has to go somewhere.
And it comes out in these...
it comes out as anxiety, depression, all these things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Emotional turmoil.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
What does that look like, though, in real life? What does that actually look like for someone who's experiencing this?
Well, it can manifest as those feelings of isolation and loneliness that we talked about before.
Right.
Because they're so afraid of being judged or rejected
that
they don't share what they're going through with anyone.
Right. So they keep it all bottled up.
Exactly, yeah. And that isolation then can really contribute to depression. And that can lead to, persistent sadness, hopelessness, fatigue.
Wow.
Even trouble sleeping.
And all that on top of this constant fear of being discovered.
Right. That's the anxiety piece that keeps you constantly on edge, worrying all the time.
Right.
And in some cases, even having panic attacks.
Oh, gosh, that sounds so difficult.
It's a lot to carry.
So it's not just this internal battle.
No.
It really starts to affect every aspect of a person's life.
It does. It spills over.
Right.
It makes it harder to function, to connect with people, even to get enough rest.
Okay.
It affects everything.
And I imagine it could have a real impact on relationships, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially, romantic partnerships.
Yes.
Because it seems like keeping such a huge part of yourself hidden would put a real strain on that bond.
It does. It creates a huge barrier.
How so?
Well, the fear of rejection from a partner is a very powerful motivator.
Sure.
So people keep this secret. But secrecy and intimacy, they don't really go hand in hand.
They're almost opposite.
Almost opposites, yeah.
Yeah.
Because open and honest communication, that's the foundation of a healthy relationship.
Right.
And a secret like this, it chips away at that foundation.
It's almost like trying to build something really strong on shaky ground.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, because that secret, it's always there.
Right.
Lurking in the background.
Yeah.
Creating tension, preventing real connection.
Yeah, I got it.
It's a problem.
And that can lead to resentment too, right?
It can, yeah.
From both sides.
Yeah, because the partner who's unaware, they might feel a distance.
Right.
But the person who's keeping the secret, they might also feel resentful.
Okay.
Because they have to hide this core part of themselves.
Right, right.
And then emotional distance just naturally grows from there.
And then on top of all of that, if the person is secretly engaging in cross-dressing, that can create even more guilt and fear.
Yeah, it can, yeah, because they're living with this constant fear of being found out.
Oh gosh, that sounds so stressful for both people involved.
It is. It's a really tough situation.
The person with the desire is living with this constant fear.
Right.
And the partner might be sensing this disconnect.
Yes.
Without understanding why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's difficult all around.
And even if someone does decide to come out after years of suppressing this part of themselves,
right,
the sources we've been looking at, they make the point that the damage might already be done.
Yeah, that's true.
It can be really difficult to repair that trust.
Absolutely. And it takes work from both sides.
Right. But there is hope, right?
There is. Right.
Because open and honest communication, even if it's hard, can lead to a stronger relationship.
It can, and it can lead to a more authentic relationship too.
So it seems like the alternative to all of this is to embrace this part of yourself.
Right.
And while that might sound really daunting at first, it seems like that actually might be the path towards, greater well-being.
It can be.
So what does that process look like? What does it involve?
Well, our sources, they contrast the distress of suppression
Right.
with the relief and the growth that comes with self-acceptance.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that acceptance doesn't have to mean, shouting it from the rooftops.
Right.
It can start with a quiet acknowledgement,
Okay.
just recognizing your own feelings as valid.
So the first step is really internal.
It is. It's about making peace with yourself.
Okay. And then what? What comes next?
Well, from there, you can take smaller steps.
All right.
Maybe you engage in some private exploration,
Okay.
connect with some support networks online or in person,
Okay.
or maybe you seek some professional guidance through therapy.
Okay.
But the key is to shift away from that constant internal battle.
And the benefits of doing that, of letting go of that struggle, they seem pretty significant from what we've been reading.
They are, yeah. I mean, a lot of people who come to embrace this part of themselves, right, they talk about this newfound freedom,
Wow.
this self-love.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and all that mental energy that was going towards suppressing,
Right.
it can be redirected towards more positive things.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So for someone who's really in the thick of it right now,
Right.
they're feeling isolated, they're feeling ashamed.
Yeah.
What kind of support is out there for them?
Well, seeking support is so important.
Okay.
And our sources, they emphasize how validating it can be
Okay.
to connect with other people who understand
Right.
what you're going through.
Right. So you don't feel so alone.
Exactly. You're not alone. And there are online forums, support groups,
Okay.
where you can find that sense of community.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And, hearing from other people who've been on a similar journey,
Yeah.
it can provide so much hope,
Okay.
practical advice,
Right.
and just that sense of belonging.
I could see how that would be really helpful.
Yeah. And of course, trusted friends can be a huge support too.
Oh, absolutely.
But our sources also highlight the importance of professional therapy,
Right.
especially with therapists who specialize in gender identity and expression,
Sure.
because they can provide a safe and confidential space
Okay.
to process those difficult feelings
Right.
and to develop strategies for self-acceptance.
And therapy can also help with those really difficult conversations, right?
It can, yeah.
Like with partners or family members.
Yeah, therapists can help you figure out how to approach those conversations,
Right.
how to communicate effectively,
Yeah,
so that there's more understanding and empathy.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so to bring this all together,
Okay.
we've seen how suppressing this desire to cross-dress
Right.
can have all these negative psychological consequences.
Right.
What's the main takeaway here? What are our sources really driving at?
Well, they're really highlighting the burden,
Yeah.
the psychological burden
Ah.
of suppressing a core part of who you are.
Okay.
We've talked about the stress, the shame,
Right.
the anxiety, the depression, the strain on relationships.
Right.
All of this underscores the cost of denying your true self,
Right.
and that cost is high.
And even though it might be difficult, it seems like the path towards self-acceptance
Yeah,
is ultimately the healthier option.
it is. It's more sustainable.
Yeah.
It's about long-term well-being.
And that's really the message that our sources are emphasizing, right?
Yeah, they're saying that self-acceptance, it might not happen overnight,
Right.
but it's a process.
Okay.
And it's worth it.
It's worth it for a more fulfilling and mentally healthy life. And for you, our listener, as you process all this information, as you think about the impact of suppressing this desire to cross-dress, I want to leave you with this thought. What other areas in your own life, or maybe in the lives of people you know, are there desires or expressions that are being suppressed? What are the hidden costs there? Even if they seem totally unrelated to what we've been talking about today, think about it. How do the principles of self-acceptance and seeking support apply in those situations too? It's a big question, but it's worth asking.